Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jake. I'm so happy to be here today, back on campus. Took the train from New York this morning. It was easy, and I'm so happy to be here. So today I want to talk about sort of some things that I've learned over my 3 years since graduating at Con. But just a little bit about me first. Hopefully the scale works. The scale's a little different on this screen, but moving forward, it'll be okay. So I graduated at Con in 2015. I was a computer science major and a math minor. As Professor merely said, I was part of the Teacher's Assistant Program and on the Student Advisory Board. Super involved. Love the computer science department. It's the best place on campus, for sure. So since graduating, I've had 2 different jobs. I first started at Alpha Sites, which is based in New York. There I was a full stack software engineer. I built internal applications using Ruby on Rails, Ember, which is a JavaScript framework, and Postgres, which is a database. So the types of things I would work on were internal applications for the business. So a little bit more about what Alpha Sites does. They help business makers make decisions about ways to invest or grow their business. So the example I like to give is pretend that you own a cat food business that manufactures cat food, and it's like super bougie and super cool, and you want to maybe add a new product to your line, maybe tuna that's sourced from Scandinavia or something like that. But you're based in the US and you don't know anybody in the Scandinavian fishing industry. So you will come to Alpha Sites and describe your problem, and our sales team will work with you to sort of connect with people who are experts in that system. So there's a whole business pipeline that the engineering team models and puts into this internal application, this customer relation management software, to sort of map that out and track that. So I get to work very closely with the business teams to sort of develop what they're working with. The second part of what I did was building phone conferencing software. So in order for that the cat food company to connect with that fisherman, there was a software that we would build together using Ruby on Rails and Twilio, which is a phone conferencing API. I was there for about 2 years, learning some new stuff. First job out of college, it was a really awesome experience. And since then, I actually this week just hit my 1-year mark at Condé Nast Entertainment. So Condé Nast, if you're not familiar, is the magazine publishing company that owns Vogue and GQ and Wired and Vanity Fair and several other magazines. So here I'm a software engineer that works with Ruby on Rails, Golang, which is Google's statically typed compiled backend language. It's really awesome. And MongoDB, which is another database. So there I work on internal and external applications. So for example, I work with the video teams at Condé Nast. So if you ever watched a video on YouTube or Apple News from one of our brands, that comes through my team. So we have content management software that sort of models out. People can create a video in our database and upload an asset to it. It will allow, so from there we take it on, we will process the video, send it out to YouTube, that sort of video processing workflow. So there it's been really awesome to work on projects that have a customer-facing or a consumer-facing interface. So if you ever go on Apple News and watch a video from like Epicurious, that was me, just saying that. Anyway, so today I'm here to talk to you about life in the workforce and sort of what it means and what it looks like to take that next step in your career after graduating from college. So the question I want to ask is, what does it mean to be like a good, successful programmer in 2018? It's easy to say, okay, you have to know your stacks from your queues, you'll have to know you had different big O notations and stuff, and all that is true. You will probably need data structures and algorithms. If you're going into web processing or web software, you'll need to know, fundamentals about the web. If you're going into data science, you'll need to know fundamentals about data science. But all that is secondary to sort of what I think is most important about putting yourself out there as a software engineer. So it's not just about knowing how to code, right? There's a whole ecosystem around programming. There's conferences, there's network events, there's all sorts of things. And for me, knowing how to code is really important, but also knowing how to talk about it is more so, in my opinion. And knowing how to think critically about it. So you may have seen some things in the news about tech companies who maybe their software isn't behaving maybe ethically or not. Facebook maybe doesn't think about security as much as it should. So they have a bunch of breaches lately. Amazon has been building some AI tools for recruiting that expose biases because people aren't thinking critically about the software that they're building. So it's one thing to build the software, but it's another thing to say, how does that software impact the world, and can I think critically about it? So another point I want to make is that programming is really a social activity. While, yes, you may spend some time out of your day sitting at a computer alone, hacking away at a problem, most of the time it's actually spent collaborating with other engineers, exchanging information, and figuring out how to solve problems together, right? So there are some things that I see in many jobs that my friends have similar experiences with in terms of social aspects to it. So every single morning at work, I have stand-up, which is my entire team sits together in a room and goes around in a circle and says what they did the previous day, how it went, if there were any problems, if they were stuck on something, couldn't figure it out, maybe exchange information with coworkers about, okay, can you help me, can we pair on this later, can we figure this out? So that's every single morning, so you go right into it, right? We also will have retros. Retros are retrospectives. Maybe every 2 weeks, my team will sit together in a room and talk about the process of programming as a team together. So it's not just about, okay, this one feature was great, but it's about, is the process that we have as a team going well? So it's a little theoretical. It's talking about, maybe I was working on a problem and I was stuck because I was waiting for somebody to give me some other piece of code and it didn't work and I was stuck, and we'll talk about that process and how to improve it. Programming as a team is continuously improving not only the code, but also your own processes and how to see things as they come and maybe be able to accommodate them to, is that better? To fix it, right? A lot of the time, teams do brown bag lunches where engineers like myself will present information to their own team. So, maybe I know something about our testing framework that maybe a different engineer doesn't know because they don't work on it. So it's a great way, these brown bag lunches we have brown bag lunches which will help engineers build their public speaking skills and be able to articulate to people that they know, that they spend time working with, these ideas that maybe are not shared among the whole team. So they're often pretty safe spaces to try things out, to do that. But yeah, so you'll definitely find yourself talking and reading code and collaborating more than you will writing it. So in that sense, liberal arts students have a huge advantage to that, right? Because we are taught to think critically about the world around us and how our code maybe impacts the world or how it intersects with other parts of life, right? Because, people say tech is eating the world, and that's true, but there will always be the humanitarian aspect of all of these things. And I think for me, I think showing and exposing your sort of liberal arts advantages really can help make a big impact in sort of the recruiting process. I know sometimes you might hear that recruiters have only 30 seconds or a minute to look at each resume as they're going through. So how do you make yourself stand out? If everybody knows their stacks from their queues, what makes you a candidate that is worth having around, right? And again, working in the workforce, you spend 40 hours a week with somebody, so you want to make sure that you can demonstrate that you have great communication skills and that you can work amicably with people, right? Because it's not just head down, it's about collaborating. So yeah, so how do you stand out as a candidate? I have a couple of different ideas that I hope today will get you sort of thinking about how you can round out your resume beyond maybe the straightforward curriculum here. So the first one, and this one is super important for me in my opinion, is starting a blog. Everybody can do it. It's a really awesome way to get your voice out there. And you don't have to talk about something revolutionary. You don't have to talk about changing the world with something you wrote in class. It doesn't have to be about that. But what we want to show to recruiters and to people is that you can think critically about code. And that you also can, if you can articulate, oh, here's a problem I found in class, and it was really interesting. I learned something new about a doubly linked list or whatever, some big O notation thing. it doesn't have to be revolutionary, but what you want to show is that you're thinking about it and that you're paying attention, that you're not just receiving an assignment and outputting some result, but you're really processing it. And it doesn't have to just be technical, right? It can be about other things that maybe are happening in your life that you like to share about, to share. But technical stuff's good too. So actually, one of my first blog posts was about the Gale-Shapley algorithm, which I learned in Professor Chung's class. So for those who haven't taken her algorithms class, it's an algorithm about, say that you have two sets of people or whatever, and they have to be paired up. The algorithm we proved in class that the algorithm could prefer one group's preferences over the other, and in that way, it gave preferential treatment. So something that I thought that was really interesting, and it was a really awesome opportunity to talk about the way that algorithms can shape our world and shape biases and impacts that we might not realize are happening. So, it was a 4-minute read. There's my blog link if you want to look at it. But yeah, so it was just a 4-minute read, just observing something that I thought was really interesting and that I didn't really expect to learn in an algorithms class, but I learned anyway. So thanks, Professor Chung. But yeah, so it's really easy to get started. There is free hosting on GitHub pages. So if anyone doesn't have a GitHub account, I highly recommend you get one today. It's super awesome. I'm on GitHub every day at work. It's where programmers collaborate. It's where all my projects live. There's a whole workflow in there that you'll definitely use when you're out in the workforce. So the sooner you can sort of get adjusted to it, definitely the better. So definitely get a GitHub account. They have free hosting for blogs, and there are tons of software that can help you get started. If you're familiar with using the terminal, there are two command line interfaces that I would recommend. That their blogs, their documentation is really awesome. You don't need to be a designer. They come packed with themes. And those two are called Hugo and Jekyll. So check them out if you want to look at them. They'll help you build a blog. You can build it statically and host it on GitHub pages, and it's awesome. And so that way you can send a recruiter or someone that you're speaking with, be like, hey, just in case you want to know more about me and sort of what my perspective is on programming, check out my blog. And it's easy to just list it out, and it really shows that you aren't just going through the motions with your education, that you're really thinking critically about it. I love blogging. It also can get you recognized and stuff. One of my blog posts was featured on a podcast about programming, and I thought that was super awesome. So it's a really great way to put yourself out there. Yeah, I would recommend it. So number one thing. I also would recommend starting a side project. So there are tons of awesome APIs or free software that different companies put out there. So for me personally, I like using Twitter, so I've been making Twitter bots for free. Twitter has an awesome public free API that you can use to build out an application, right? So for an example, I have a bot, so every hour it will run this code and it will tweet out some random thing. There's a bunch of different ones, right? So I was able to read up on the API documentation. I know how to make a for loop. I know how to do all that stuff. So I was able to put that out there, put it on my resume. Definitely became a talking point in my interviews and stuff. There are tons of awesome APIs out there that you can use. Google has a ton because they're Google. Foursquare has one, or Yelp. Reddit, if you like Reddit and you want to make your own client or something like that, you could use that. LinkedIn, the list goes on. There's a ton of stuff. You don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be revolutionary again, but just showing that you can take the fundamentals that you're learning in class and apply them in a practical way that you can create a product. That's pretty cool. But if you are not totally sure what you would want to work on right now, I would also recommend contributing to open source software. So open source software is public code that's freely accessible on GitHub, so GitHub again. So a ton of major libraries that you probably are using and don't even realize it are already free and open source on GitHub. So React, which is Facebook's JavaScript library, it's the JavaScript library that is used on Facebook.com. That's free open source software that people could contribute to, and you can send a pull request their way and they'll look at it, give you feedback. It's a pretty awesome thing when a Facebook maintainer is like, hey, this is pretty cool or whatever. And there are a lot of really awesome ways to get started. People the open source community is super inclusive and super excited for new people to join. So I would definitely recommend checking it out. A couple different ways that I would recommend. I know we just missed October for this talk, but every October there's an event called Hacktoberfest, where if you sign up and you make 5 open source contributions, they'll send you a free t-shirt. It's pretty cool. There's also websites called First Timers Only and Up for Grabs, which are applications that hook into GitHub to look for projects that are looking for new contributors and who are looking for maybe projects or issues or problems that aren't too crazy, that are easier for people who aren't super familiar with the language or something like that to get started. So there are a ton of great ways to contribute to open source. And I think that really demonstrates for recruiters and as a talking piece in an interview to say, hey, you know, I work on my private company stuff, but I also like to give back, right? So I also can contribute to other things in this free way that gives back for the greater good. Yeah. So those are some technical things that you could maybe do while you're here at Con, but there's also some supplemental computer science education things that I could definitely recommend. Because while we do understand like tons of fundamentals here that you really will use all the time, you know, the algorithms and the data structures that they teach you in class, they go a long way, and you'll find yourself coming back to those fundamentals all the time. But there are certain like technical, gritty things that you might have to learn on the job or something like that. So some advice I would have to give, check out these 2 websites, Treehouse and Codecademy. They have online courses that teach you different frameworks and stuff like that. So if you're curious about React, like Facebook's language, Facebook's JavaScript framework, they have courses on that teach you not only the fundamentals, but also how to structure an application and all that stuff. So if you know a little bit of JavaScript and you know your fundamentals, it can be pretty easy for us as computer science graduates or students to learn that pretty quickly. So definitely recommend that. Additionally, there are boot camps that one might want to consider after graduating. So a coding boot camp is a course which is often about 3 months, 10 to 12 weeks, where they teach you what web programming is like or iOS programming is like, you know, on the ground. So I attended the Flatiron School shortly after graduating, and they taught me Ruby on Rails and a couple of different frameworks, right? And so I think for computer science and students at these programs, I think we really have an advantage. Like, so some people who go into these boot camps that don't have the fundamentals, not only are they learning Ruby on Rails or these big frameworks, but they also have to learn, okay, what is a for loop? What is a class? What is object-oriented programming? What is inheritance on all of these things? So we already have that under our belt. So we can really focus on learning these real web tools, and you have opportunities to build apps there and that sort of thing. So these are 2 boot camps that I would recommend looking into if that's something that a direction you're interested in going. Yeah, so Khan College really prepares you for programming in the real world. It gives you the fundamentals that you will come back to all the time. While you might, sometimes it's hard to see, okay, how does this specific algorithm come into my life later down the line? And it's not necessarily about the algorithm itself, but it's the way that you think critically about how to solve a problem. That takes you really far. And applying that knowledge and integrating it with sort of like the liberal arts aspect of thinking about the bigger picture and how do these things intersect with each other. Those things really can elevate you in the process of looking for a job. So yeah, knowing about algorithms is really important, but knowing how to talk about them is really important too. So if I were to give one sort of final piece to this, I would just say, you know, put your voice out there. What makes you and your education, like, what makes you stand out from a crowd? And I think using these different tools that I've provided today or suggested today, building a blog, maybe contributing to open source or a side project, how do you let your voice shine through your code? So that's something I would challenge everyone to think about today. Thanks a lot.